Welcome back, my guys. Today we are going to talk about maximizing performance, and this is very much applicable towards your off-season and prep because both can kind of intertwine into the subject. So a deep dive on maximizing your performance. Now, before we get going with the rest of the video, please make sure you hit the subscribe button. Please support the channel, show me some love, hit a like, and if you do have any questions as well, comment below because there will be another Q&A coming your way. So if you do have any specific questions, and good questions, I will cover them on our YouTube Q&A. So as always, giving back to you guys with the content and trying to provide as much value as possible. Now, if you want to support me, make sure you use Kuba 10 with Trained by JP and code Kuba of Hardbody as well. If you are looking to get some quality supplements or quality gym wear. Now, on to the topic at hand, maximizing training performance. Now, where I actually want to start with maximizing training performance and maximizing performance in general is the more emotionally detached you can be towards the process, the better. When you get certain emotional attachments towards a certain methodology, a certain diet, or even a certain structure, it will always be a limiting factor when it comes to maximizing your progress. One thing you have to accept is that there is always a way that you can improve your process. And this means that you cannot be married to just one approach. You have to keep an open mind and you have to approach your entire process with flexibility and the ability to pivot and sometimes not completely change your ways, but look for ways to improve your process and further refine it. Now, what I do as an athlete and as a coach hasn't changed all that much over the past 2 years. What has changed is the refinement of the strategies I put in place, and my knowledge has improved, therefore allowing me to make better decisions and allowing me to be smarter with what I do and how I do it. So again, it's constant refinement of the process and having an open mind to new ideas and new approaches. Now, your goal in an off-season setting and in prep is always maximizing your performance and maximizing your progression. Now, how you make progress may be approached in multiple different ways. And ultimately, it's down to you to find the most efficient way for you to make progress. So if you find yourself that you are constantly getting injured following a certain training approach, it might be time to actually scale back and pull back on either your intensity or training volume. So you have to make sure that you maintain composure and you make logical decisions around your process. And again, this is where constant evolvement and constant reevaluation of what you do and how you do it plays a pivotal role in your ability to keep making progress, both in the gym and outside of the gym. Right, so first and foremost, how can you maximize your progress on the gym floor? I think consistency and persistence is the key. The longer you can stick at certain movements, the more you can simply get out of them. I really think that a lot of people look for novelty over focusing on consistent progression over time. Whenever I approach any exercise, not only my sole focus is maintaining my execution, maintaining the intensity, but also trying to get the most out of that lift over time. If you are constantly chopping and changing exercises, you will always limit your ability to progress. So if you want to truly get the most out of your training setup, you have to stay locked in and you have to give it a chance to actually work. Because if you haven't stayed consistent enough and you haven't actually given a training program or training split enough time to see if it's working or not, it's physically impossible for you to gauge what changes you may need to make to either make the setup more effective or changes that needed to be made to simply get more from it. You need consistency and you need to make sure that you stay persistent over time. So chase progress and chase quality over novelty. If you are finding yourself going to the gym and doing random exercises with no structure, you will always limit your ability to progress. Now look, if you are a genetic freak and you look at a weight and you respond, you're probably not watching this channel, let's be real. But if you are not the genetic elite, unfortunately, if you're a mere mortal, you will need to stay a little bit more consistent, and you will need to have a little bit of a smarter approach when it comes to your training. And that means sticking to your training program over long periods of time, making sure that you are logging your lifts, making sure that your progression on the gym floor is steady and controlled. The single biggest mistake I see people make is not only trying to progress too much week to week, but also allowing the form and execution to break down from an exercise just to try and progress the load. That's not true progressive overload. You need to stay locked in and maintain your execution, and to make sure that progression is standardized. Because if you're constantly chopping and changing either exercises or changing execution, range of motion to simply get more load, you will eventually get less from the movements. So you need to lean into your training. Your training is by far one of the most important variables when it comes to really maximizing your training performance. And how you approach your training really does play a role, because ultimately you need just enough training stimulus to progress, and you need to be mindful of not overcooking yourself as well. So the reference point that I like to use when it comes to setting your training volume is you need to have the ability to progress your lifts session to session. If you are going to each session and you are not seeing meaningful progression from session to session, you are likely working with too much volume. If you are seeing crazy jumps in strength whilst your form execution is standardized, you are likely not working with enough volume. So as a reference point, going into your training program, if you want to maximize your training performance, always err on side of caution and start with less volume if you are advanced. Then you can always add volume as you go along within your training program. But initially, you want to start with lower volume to then have scope to be able to add more sets should you need them. And then over time, as adaptation happens, you may actually need to progress your volume slightly to create a little bit more of an adaptive response to keep making progress. Start slow, start low, and then build up from there. Your ability to recover will largely be dependent on your ability to stay fit. Now, there's multiple ways for you to be able to actually uphold your fitness levels. Number one is keeping your body fat levels in check. Number two, keeping your NEAT consistent and in a place where you are not getting out of breath just doing normal day-to-day tasks. Number three, add in direct cardio if you need it. If you are extremely sedentary and your steps are pretty low, direct cardio will be of benefit. Alternatively, keeping between 7,000 to 10,000 steps across your day as a bigger individual, I think, is a minimum of what you should be aiming for in order to keep basic fitness levels in place. Now, this is where my opinion differs slightly, is that adding more cardio doesn't necessarily give you more recovery. It will allow you to stay fitter, but adding more cardio and more work will not lead to better recovery. It leads to less recovery. So you need to find the right balance of just doing enough to stay fit without pushing the boundaries and taking away from your recoverability, because everything that you are doing should be focused around training performance and your ability to progress your lifts. Doing more cardio is not going to lead to that. It may allow you to stay fitter, yes, it may allow you to stay healthier, but it may also detract from your training performance. So it's a fine balance that you need to have when it comes to your management of fitness levels. Now, my favorite way of managing my fitness is maintaining my higher rep sets on big compound lifts, which again, it is quite demanding, yes, but if I am still able to do a set of 15 reps on a leg press that lasts over a minute, that in itself will challenge my fitness levels, and that in itself will improve my fitness levels. Now, me personally, I do a 22-minute walk, exactly 22-minute walk every single day, no fail, and that stays consistent year round. Joe can vouch for this because I did this in America as well, and that allows me to stay fit. As I get heavier, as you can imagine, the demand that this walk has when I'm 240 pounds versus right now at 260 is completely worlds apart. But my goal is to complete that morning walk with the same time frame every single day. So as you can imagine, the walking gets more challenging, but I also have to walk harder and harder in order to maintain the time frame and the distance walked for myself within that setup on a daily basis. So upholding NEAT, not getting fat, keeping cardio in if you need it. That in itself will allow you to perform better in the gym, feel better, recover better session to sessions, and recover better in between your sets. Let's talk a little bit about rep ranges. If you want to truly maximize your progress, you need to be using a variety of rep ranges. Not only different rep ranges will give you a completely different stimulus, but having multiple rep ranges across the sets and across your logbook allows you to have progression with different loads. And again, different stimulus. What you can get out of a set of 6 to 9 versus a set of 10 to 12 or 12 to 15 is going to vary, and it's going to be completely different. The reason why I am a fan of varying your rep ranges across multiple lifts is that, one, you do get a different challenge and a different stimulus. And secondly, you are managing your load exposure. So I always have different reference points of using different loads across certain lifts with different rep ranges. So if I go into a certain session and for whatever reason, my connective tissue may not feel great, I will have a reference point of doing a higher rep range set for me to beat. So I am still able to progress my logbook and progress my lifts. So you need to aim to get stronger across a variety of rep ranges. And again, it will definitely vary your stimulus slightly, and it will definitely give you a different challenge and still give you the ability to progress your lifts across the board. The last thing you want to do is just get married to one rep range and stick to that across the board, because let me tell you, different rep ranges are more suited to different body parts in my opinion. So it's more of a trial and error. And as a reference point, anything between 5 up to 20 and 30 repetitions roughly builds muscle at the same rate. The biggest thing that matters is your effort. Effort in close proximity to failure is the key, and it's the king of growing muscle tissue. Now, one way I have seen people transform the lifting and improve the training performance is learning how to brace. When I did my PT work on the gym floor back in the day, the first thing I used to teach my clients is how to actually brace through the abdominals. A strong brace will create more internal stability, allowing you to perform better across any compound lift and even machine work. If you do not have control over your body and you do not have control over your spine, you will always be slightly weaker. So learn how to brace and make sure that you are able to create more abdominal pressure to create a little bit more tension between your diaphragm and your pelvis when you are going into more heavier compound lifts. Off the back of that, you will see much more progress and more safety, avoiding any injuries, but also getting more out of your compound lifts. Now, when you are going through training blocks and when you are approaching your training in general, do not be afraid to reset your lifts. This is where you have to be extremely objective with your execution and with your progression. Over time, as you progress your lifts and inevitably as you get stronger, you will get to a point where continuing to try and get stronger is just not an option. This is where an option comes into play as a way to progress your lift is resetting your loading. So it would be a reduction in load and potentially adding a longer pause in the stretch or even a longer eccentric, making that lift harder and allowing you to get more out of less. And then also it then leads to a completely different challenge and completely different stimulus. So I will very often build up my certain loading on a lift with just standard tempo, right? Once I get to a point where the lifts are stalling or where the loading gets to a point where it's quite dangerous because it's so heavy, I will then take an option of resetting my lift, dropping the loading slightly, and then slowing down the eccentric, spending time in the stretch, doing everything I can to make the lift harder to simply get more from it using less load. And this is where you have to be extremely objective and honest with your ability to progress. It's key. And it's so important for longevity within your training blocks, but also longevity within your training and your career as a bodybuilder or just your general lifestyle. Now, a big part of maximizing progression is periodization and having an objective point of view on managing your fatigue. You physically cannot just train forever. There will be a time where you need to pull back on your training and go for an actual deload. And this is where you will often somewhat resensitize yourself to training volume as well. So over the training block, your training volume might increase. You will get stronger or you may add more sets as a way to progress. If you find yourself that you are necessarily struggling to progress certain lifts, adding more sets is an option, yes. And then taking time off the gym when fatigue gets high is extremely important as a way to continue making the progress throughout your off season, because inevitably there will come a time where fatigue will get so high and it cannot be avoided and you will need to reset. Now, generally, I like just straight days off away from the gym. It's always serves the best purpose. And this is where you have to be honest with yourself. And when you get to that point where you're tired, simply take the days off, come back in the gym fresher and stronger. And then always be mindful that your body will be somewhat detrained going back into the gym after a rest. So always go back in with less volume and or less intensity for the first few sessions at least. An analogy I'll have to give for this is you have to warm up the oven before you start cooking. So be mindful of that. And again, this is a huge part of truly maximizing your training performance and maximizing your progress for an off-season setting. One mistake I often see people make within the off-season and prep is utilizing way too much volume and too much training frequency. I say this very, very often to my clients in the check-ins is you can only do what you can recover from. So what I mean by that is we can all go in the gym and spend hours in the gym, but is it productive? All your work on the gym floor has to be extremely productive. If you are going in the gym and you are just doing sets for sake of sets, you are not seeing meaningful progression, you are simply wasting time and you are only taking away from your ability to progress your lifts. So it's extremely important that you manage your training volume and you manage your training frequency in a fashion to either uphold your lifts in a contest prep setting where you are not seeing a drop off in strength. If you are seeing a drop off in strength, you are likely working with too much volume. The same applies for the off season. There's only so much volume you can handle before your body actually breaks down and you do get that inverted U where more volume to a degree does more and then more volume does less. Now, how much volume can tolerate will vary person to person depending on your ability to recover, your size, your strength, multiple factors and facets, but ultimately your goal is always progressing your lifts and progressing session to session. If you are doing high amounts of volume and you are simply not seeing progress, you need to scale back the volume. At no point should you not be seeing a meaningful progression over time, and at no point should you be seeing any drop-offs in strength, especially in off-season setting or even in prep. Towards the end of prep, yes, you'll have to accept for some strength loss, but generally as a whole, you want to always focus on maintaining your strength to the best of your ability through managing your training volume, either lowering it or adding it where plausible, and manage your training frequency. Sometimes less is more, quite literally. Dorian Yates is the prime example of that. Now, last but not least, guys, before I give you a summary, when it comes to prep and when it comes to off-season, if you are looking to get the best results, fast is never going to lead to any great results. Slow, controlled rate of gain over time in an off-season setting is always going to lead to not only more muscle, less body fat accrual, but also much better health markers. That's a win-win. Now, one consideration to make as well is this, guys. The more controlled your rate of gain is, less body fat you accumulate, less inflammation you accumulate, the longer you can stay in a surplus, protecting your appetite, and the longer you can actually make progress for. So that is a huge factor you need to lean into. Patience is everything when it comes to bodybuilding. And the same applies when it comes to contest prep. Slow, controlled rate of loss over time will not only lead to more muscle retention, but much better training performance. So you want to stay in either a small surplus over a longer period of time for an off-season setting to maximize your training performance, limit inflammation, and limit body fat accrual, and maximize your actual gains through staying more insulin sensitive and more responsive to not only the food, but also the training, allowing you to recover better because you are not suffering through poor sleep and poor recovery from being fat and unfit. On the other hand, slow controlled rate of loss in a contest prep is always king. Smaller the deficit, more retention of muscle you will have through simply staying stronger in the gym, maximizing your training performance, but also feeling better as a byproduct of that. The harsher the deficit, the harsher the adaptations will happen on your body through loss of strength, poor sleep, stress accumulating. So you want to map out your timelines where you can allow for controlled rate of gain, maximizing your training performance in off-season setting, and then a slow rate of loss, maximizing your training performance in a contest prep setting. So guys, last but not least, a little bit of a summary for you. Please remember, off-season is not a reason for you to take your foot off the gas. Off-season is simply an extension of your contest prep. The only thing that should really differ is how much food you eat. Your routine should remain consistent. Your sleep, your schedule, stress management, all the good habits you've learned in prep should be maintained throughout an off-season setting to maintain progression and maintain your efforts with quality. Now, staying fit is the key. Making sure you don't get too fat, making sure that you do uphold your NEAT, and again, effort with your day-to-day execution. Now, last but not least, stay accountable to either a mentor or coach or even to yourself, and stay true to your goals. Extremely important. Bodybuilding's hard, guys. And if you need the extra support, get it. I will always believe that every athlete will always operate with great support system around them. Whether it's your partner or a friend or a training partner or a coach or a mentor, you need that support network giving you the support that you need and a shoulder or an arm to lean on when you are in times of need. Now, last but not least, guys, slow and steady wins the race. Whichever phase you commit to, if you want to maximize your progress, you need to stay patient, you need to stay consistent, and you need to stay persistent. Now, that is, guys, how you maximize your training performance and maximize your performance across everything that you do, because everything I've just listed here, if you apply the same principles towards business, you will be successful. You apply the same principles towards your bodybuilding goals, you will be extremely successful. And unless you are genetic elite, if you are, don't listen to this, you don't need to. If you are a mere mortal like myself and all of you watching this, unfortunately, you need to make sure that you are taking your boxes with effort to truly reach your potential. Absolutely nobody watching this is ever going to reach their potential without putting an immense amount of effort into ticking all your boxes with quality on a day-to-day basis throughout your off-season, throughout prep, year-round. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching. Stay true to yourself, stay consistent, stay patient, stay persistent, get massive 101. Thank you, guys. Take care for now.